Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast. It is episode 5. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and a very special guest from Ontario, Canada, Dalton Laino. Dalton, how are you?
Joe, I appreciate it, man. I'm always excited about sitting down and having a conversation with you. You know, we have had many conversations both on podcast and off podcast, so I always enjoy our time together.
Of course, man. Yeah, I've been on 4 of your podcasts. You've already been on one of my podcasts. Not this one, though. The one qualm I have with you tonight is that you're wearing a Boston Red Sox hat. So the people can't see it. I'll let it slide because you're a good guy. But, aside from the fact that you're sporting a Red Sox hat, I just wanted you to introduce yourself to the audience because I know you do a lot of different things, and I'll just put the ball in your court and let you run with it.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. My name's Dalton. I think me and Joe kind of got connected through our profession. So physical therapy, I'm a physical therapist as well as a business owner. So, I started that within the last year. Outside of like business and physical therapy, I like to say I'm a avid exerciser. Most recently, dabbling into the endurance world, went from the world of football to the world of CrossFit to the endurance world. And I've really enjoyed that transition, but overall that's like a quick little summary of me. And I'm sure we'll dive into all the other stuff that you got for me, Joe. So.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's a great introduction. And, I think what's worthwhile to jump into since you mentioned it is the fact that you're a business owner. And so when we were speaking last summer, you were getting ready to launch your business, your physical business, in the middle of a global pandemic. And I would imagine that was a difficult and challenging circumstance for you. And so maybe let's start there. And why don't you just tell us about the business itself and how it came about and maybe some of the struggles that you guys faced as you went to open things up.
Yeah. So how the business kind of got started, it originally started as just like a kind of social media brand that myself and my business partner, Will, had started while we were in physio school, which is when me and you met, Joe.
Go ahead. Give it the plug, Dalton. Shameless here.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Yeah. So yeah, you can check it out. The Movement PTs on Instagram. But yeah, so we started out as an Instagram page where we posted a lot of content and then eventually just progressed, as we evolved as people and as clinicians and in the profession, the brand evolved with us. And the goal was always to kind of take it into something else. We didn't know quite what that would look like, but the timing was right about a year ago where we launched our business. So as Joe alluded to, like we signed our lease to our physical location in February. So literally, 3 weeks before the pandemic, the original pandemic hit and shut everything down, which, is a bit of a shock when it happens. But in the moment, for us, it was a matter of like, okay, well, we're committed to this. We got to just deal with what we're dealing with and move forward. And I think that's kind of how, I've always looked at it. And there's some things that were out of our control and we tried not to focus on that. And what we could control was, okay, well, we have, 6 months here to build out our actual location. Cause that we were building out from the ground up. Everything kind of ended up working out in terms of timelines. And we were able to open the business and get into full swing of it. So that was a blessing. In terms of like difficulties, I think it's just balancing the many responsibilities that you have, like trying to launch a business. Myself and my 2 business partners, Will and Dawn, like we didn't have any experience as business owners. So, you slowly start to realize that there's many, many things that you have to get done. So trying to prioritize and execute on those things, I think is honestly the most challenging because you'll never ever not have something to do. And some things are just not going to get accomplished. So I think trying to prioritize and execute and then accepting the fact that there's going to be things that aren't going to get done, which for me can be challenging sometimes because I want to just complete everything that I have on my plate, would be kind of two of the bigger learning experiences, I think, early on in the business for sure.
Yeah, that's all great stuff. And I think one of the points you touched on that's really challenging for me is understanding that not everything is going to go as planned, and not everything that you want to get done is going to get done. And some things are okay waiting for tomorrow. And I think that's a concept that I struggle with because I see every day as a series of opportunities. And if you're not fully capitalizing on the opportunities you have, at the end of the day, sometimes there are things left over. But what I've learned is even if you are running on full efficiency mode, you're getting everything done, being a business owner is so challenging because things pop up you can't see, right? You might start one day and think you have A, B, and C to do. And by the end of the day, X, Y, and Z also popped up. And now you're dealing with the whole alphabet, and that's challenging. I think one of the things that I really admire about you in your pursuit of this business is just your level of commitment. And from the outside, it's just an unwavering sense of forward motion. And I don't know if that's what it feels like to you on the day to day, but from the outside, it seems like no matter what the circumstance, you're always marching forward and it seems somewhat smooth. And I'm curious that from your perspective, in the thick of it, is that how it feels to you? Or does it feel maybe a little more segmented and rigid up and down?
Yeah, definitely not smooth. Sometimes you obviously on Instagram or in the internet world, you're always going to see a lot of the smoothness, right? But it's definitely not smooth. And I think it's not that that I'm not moving forward or we're not moving forward. I think that's definitely something that we're always doing. I just don't think it's that smooth trajectory that it looks like at times. And there's long periods of time for myself, both like in my personal life or in my business life, where you're stuck for a period of time. But it's always about, okay, how can I continue to work to figure out how you become unstuck? And I think life's a constant battle of trying to figure out how to get unstuck out of the mud.
That's so good, man. I was just listening to a talk that Simon Sinek put out on the internet. And in the conversation, he was explaining this story of these two lumberjacks. And they would both go to work at the same time every day. And they would both leave work at the same time every day. However, the one lumberjack would take a 1 hour break in the middle of the day, and he would leave and come back and then resume his work. And over time, the lumberjack that wasn't taking a break realized, like, hey, wait a sec, this other guy's chopping more wood than I'm chopping, and he's working less hours. What's going on? And so he confronted the guy and he said, listen, I don't know what you're doing, but one, I don't like it. And two, like, what are you doing? And the guy said, I'm just sharpening my axe. And he was intentionally stepping away from his work, taking time where he wasn't being quote unquote productive in the stereotypical sense of the term. And he was sharpening his axe and actually being more productive in the long run. And I think sometimes for me, those periods of feeling stuck can actually be almost like a winding up where you're recoiling. And then when you get unstuck, finally, you propel forward. But I think that's really hard to appreciate when you're in that stuck moment. And so I'm curious for you, whether it's business or personal life or anywhere else, when you are stuck, are there strategies or thought processes or insights that you've taken from those moments that you remind yourself of when you're feeling stuck?
Yeah, for sure. I think sometimes the hardest part can be identifying when you are stuck, like almost like you're not even realizing it and you're kind of just going spinning your wheels over and over. And then eventually, when you do realize that, I think the biggest thing for me has always been kind of similar to what you're saying in the sense of like taking a step back, but more almost just reflecting on what's actually been going on for that period of time
Mm.
to identify like, what those issues are. And then I think once you're able to step back and just realize you're stuck, identify what it is, it's then a matter of, okay, how do I get out of this? And oftentimes it's going to be something that you're going to have to self initiate, on your own, whether that be like, create a new plan or like a new schedule to like kind of switch things up. Another thing is for me is honestly, getting help. And big fan that I'm a big fan of like coaches. So like getting coaches to help me. So whether that be if it's a physical side of things where you're stuck, or even just like lifestyle or mindset side of things, I think it's okay to reach out and get help on that end to help move you forward out of that stuck position. So
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And of course, I'm biased because I am a coach and you do similar things and we help people. But sometimes I think reaching out for help, especially when it's in more of a mental or emotional capacity, there's this stigma that's attached with that. And there's been a stigma for a long time. And I think it's getting better and better. But when I was in graduate school, that first year of school for me, as you know, Dalton, was a really dark time in my life. It was super challenging and I was stuck, for lack of a better term. And repeatedly, I would attempt to reach out for help. Most times that was to my family. And the advice that I repeatedly received was that I should go seek out actual help from a counselor. And I had such a resistance. And it was just this, it was built into me from just everything that I believed about the world. And so finally I broke through that barrier and I went to go see a counselor. And I remember sitting in the waiting room, head between my knees, so embarrassed. I'm pretty sure I had a sweatshirt on with the hood up. I didn't want anybody to see me. Got called into the office. We had a conversation. Counselor got to know me. She asked a few questions and I left. And I immediately at that point said to myself, I'm never going back. And I didn't go back. And luckily for me, things got better on their own and they resolved. But if I could go back in time, I would now 100% go and get professional help from the start, because there's no shame involved. When our bodies are hurt, we go and seek out help. When we have a problem with our car, we go to somebody with more expertise. So when it comes to our personal development or growth, that's why now I'm such a big advocate for going to get help, whether that's from any sort of professional or even just seeking out a friend or a family member or a coach, someone like you or I, just to get better faster, because a lot of times people will figure it out, but there's a certain efficiency that comes with guidance from somebody else and that outside perspective. So I appreciate what you said. And I think now that we're all warmed up, right, I want to dive into some of the good stuff. Now, I personally know your backstory, and I'm going to ask you this question and you can take it however you want. But one of the things I'm asking people is, what is the hardest thing or circumstance that you've ever had to handle? So something that's been thrown at you by life that you didn't choose, but it happened and you had to handle it. What is that for you?
yeah, I know when you toss me these questions beforehand, which I usually like to go off the cuff, but I'm glad you did, because it got me thinking. But I think you even prior to the questions had asked something like, if you could define your life in like a couple sentences, what would that look like? And for me, the first thing that came to my mind is just like, I've had an immense amount of opportunity, immense amount of love and joy in my life, with a side of adversity that's definitely like shaped me, right?
Mm.
And I think that piece of adversity came when I was 19, when I lost my mom to cancer, and it's something that you can't prepare for. And it was something that happened quick for me, like from the time that we kind of found out that she was sick to the time where she passed was very fast. So it's never easy, but in terms of like that preparation of trying to kind of wrap your head around it, wasn't necessarily there. And I think the hardest part is having someone in your life who not only brought you into this world, but was someone who raised you and nurtured you and gave you the opportunities. To have them then not be there is something that's it's tough, and it's a hard thing to almost wrap your head around. And I still don't even necessarily know if I've fully wrapped my head around that kind of experience, but that's definitely probably in my experience the top piece of adversity and challenge that I've faced.
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing that. And, that's however many years ago you were still a teenager. What were some of the emotions and thoughts and things that were going through your mind at that time? If you can transport back and kind of grab some of those, I mean, what was going through your mind?
It almost seems like in the early moments like a dream. Like it doesn't really, in my experience anyway, it didn't really seem real at the time. So I think it's almost like trying to at first like understand and accept that something like that's happened. So there wasn't really like a whole lot going through my mind at that current time. But like, as time goes on, even after it's occurred, like reflecting on it, and actually having things to start to set in, you go through a wide variety of emotions, obviously like sadness, and then anger, and then a lot of like confusion and questioning, like, why is this happening? So I think just those normal kind of stages that people will go through loss is definitely something that I experienced. And then a little bit longer after the period of time, as things have settled and I kind of got through it, like it was a lot of like gratitude for just the opportunities that I had while my mom was alive. Like as I developed in my life and learned and experienced things, it's like just being grateful for the time that I had with her and what I learned at that time that I could now implement into my life.
Man, you're so good at podcasts, man. You answered my next question before I even answered it. I was going to ask if there were any positives, and I know that's a tough question. That's a real tough question. Are there positives that came out of losing a family member, let alone your mom? And you answered it there. Are there any other things that you see coming out of that situation now, in hindsight, that have shaped you in a positive way outside of that perspective of gratitude?
Yeah, I think it gives you a new perspective on like what life is. It kind of brings to that moment that like anything can happen and change in the blink of an eye. It kind of made me realize how there's like this dynamic play in life of like it's the most beautiful, purest thing that you could have, but yet is so fragile and challenging at the same time. And it's like a constant like change between those two, I think. And it really made me um, you know, just be grateful for being alive and being able to experience those things, I think is definitely one of the things for sure.
Yeah. And I think what you said there about things that are fragile are also precious. And it's this delicate balance between the two, right? Things can be fragile and right on the edge of it could be gone just like that. But at the same time, that actually makes it all the more beautiful while it's happening. And so that's one of the reasons why life is so precious and such a gift, because at any moment it can be taken away. And, I I was in a car accident when I was I want to say probably 2021. I was driving to the gym, just a normal day, and a car ran a stop sign, and we kind of intersected at the front corners of our car. And I was in a Jeep, they were in a smaller car, and my car rolled one and a half or two times. Like I don't even remember, but I just remember the feeling of being in the car, realizing what was happening, grabbing the steering wheel as tight as I could. Everything slowed down. I can still taste the airbag in my mouth. It's the weirdest thing right now as I'm talking. I feel like I can smell it. It's like in the back of my throat. And the whole world was just spinning in front of me. And I just remember the only thing that I could think of and feel was that I wasn't going to get to see the people that I loved ever again. My parents, the rest of my family, my friends, everybody that I'd ever interacted with. I was going to be gone from the face of the earth. And in that, whatever it was, 3 seconds, which felt like 3 hours, I just gripped and closed my eyes, and I opened them, and I was still alive, and I was strapped in, and I was kind of stuck in the seatbelt because it had tightened so much. And the driver's side door was up in the air. And I remember trying to kick it open with my foot, and I couldn't get there. And luckily, someone who was driving behind me stopped, climbed on top of the car, opened the door, helped me undo my seatbelt, and got me out. And I remember standing on the sidewalk, looking back at my car, patting myself down, making sure that I was okay, realizing that I was completely fine. I was still alive. And that was the most blissful moment of my entire life. And I wish I could just capture that emotion in a bottle and just take a whiff of it on those days where you just don't want to get out of bed, or those days where things just feel hard, because like you said, it puts it in perspective that life is so much bigger than anything we're dealing with. And every single day that we get to take another breath is a good day. And I think that experience, right, paired with kind of what you said, hopefully would make anybody who's listening understand that if you are hearing our voices right now, listening to this podcast, you've got a lot to smile about. And there's a lot of good that comes from literally just being alive, because it's such a gift. And so, Dalton, I appreciate you sharing that. And, you know, to kind of go off of it, if somebody was in the position that you were in back when you were 19 years old, they lost a loved one, or maybe they're just going through a loss of some kind, is there advice or guidance that you would give to that person who maybe is listening to this podcast right now at this very moment and is just hurting and doesn't know where to turn or what to do?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think looking back on myself and even how I would maybe approach something um, like this, if it was to occur, is like kind of thinking first off, accepting how your emotions feel, like what you're feeling, if you're upset, if you're sad, if you're hurt, like just kind of accepting those and feeling them and being in them. I think, something that I continue to do often is just push those aside and just, that idea of like continuing to move forward. And so accepting those things and feeling all of those things, I think is okay and probably should be done for a period of time. I think after that, though, it's important to try to get out of those feelings, because I think they can become debilitating in the sense of moving your life forward. So I think it's then a matter of just almost sitting with yourself and having those tougher conversations, or trying to get to the bottom of what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what's holding you back from kind of moving forward. And then I think after that would be that seeking help side of things, or asking someone or telling someone about what you're going through, or trying to get their perspective on the situation. Because I think a lot of times when you're in it, it's hard to see it from another side of things. So getting someone else's perspective and insights onto some of those conversations that you've had with yourself, I think can be extremely helpful to make sure, one, that you're trending in the right direction, because sometimes maybe you're not, or two, to just layer on some thoughts for you. And then I would say, lastly is just to continue to always have like hope. I think hope's a big thing, to know that eventually you're going to come out on the other side of it. Especially if you've taken the first kind of three steps there, like not giving up hope and continuing to just push forward and know that you're going to come out on the other side.
Yeah, I love those. And just kind of to recap, at least what I heard was like those emotions and feelings are going to happen regardless, whether or not you want to acknowledge them. And, you at a certain point, you're going to have to sit with those feelings and feel what you're feeling. And that's totally okay and probably necessary. But then after a certain point, you're going to have to get past those feelings and emotions. And while you could still accept them and feel them, you can't let them paralyze you. And so that's where it really comes back to self-reflection, self-awareness. Who do I want to be? Where do I want to go? And then getting help and getting outside perspectives, because just like you said, and I believe Les Brown said this quote, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. And when you're in that painful frame, it's even harder to see the picture. And so getting help, seeking advice, guidance, perspective, whatnot from other people that you trust and people who care about you, that's important. And then from there, just always having hope and not letting discouragement stop you from seeing the possibility that tomorrow could be a better day. And I think, again, all of those things are easier said than done. But at the end of the day, I think for me, in addition to these things that you said, just the understanding that there are other people out there who are going through similar things, if not the same thing, and people who are feeling the same feelings is so comforting and encouraging. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast in particular. Project Endure is all about doing hard things, building endurance, being resilient, practicing positive perspective, But I think hearing real stories from real people who have been through some really tough stuff and then continue to do hard things, which is where we'll go next. I think that's so encouraging for the people out there who might be listening, who are in the middle of it, because as much as you or I could look back on something that was hard and now we're past it and we can say, maybe I'm not glad that happened, but it happened and I'm better for it. When hard things are happening and when we're hurting, it could be really hard to choose that perspective. So thank you for sharing all that, Dalton. And with that being said, right, I know that you continue to do hard things all the time, right? Whether it's in business, in the world of endurance sport or whatnot, you're pushing the limits. And so my next question for you, maybe we exclude the business venture since we already spoke about that, is what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose?
Um, yeah, I mean, I would have to say recently I completed like my first ultra marathon. So I think that's definitely one of the hardest things that I've done on purpose. The way that the race was laid out was it's called a backyard ultra. So essentially you run in Canada it's kilometers, so 6.7 kilometer loop every hour on the hour for as long as you can until either you give up or until you win. So basically how you win is if it's you and me, Joe, and we're on lap like 40 and you can't make the lap within the hour or you give up, I have to complete like one more lap and then I win. So that's kind of how the race ends. You either choose to stop or you outlast everyone else. So that was my first intro into the ultra world. So I ended up completing like a total of 80 kilometers, which is, basically double a marathon, which is like the longest distance prior to that is what I would have ran, would have been a marathon. So that was definitely one of the most challenging things that I've put myself in on purpose.
Wow. And so, anybody out there listening in the United States, which is probably most of you, 6.7 kilometers is 4.163 miles, just for reference. So, no, that's incredible, Dalton. And I guess the follow up question naturally is, right, that sounds hard. It sounds like it hurt. Why did you do that?
Yeah. Um, I think I think you learn a lot about yourself in those positions, and I think I'm grateful to be able to be in the position that I am and not have too many challenges in my life. Like I have a lot of opportunity, and I think continuing to put yourself into those challenging positions, you can learn a little bit about yourself. And from a physical standpoint, I hadn't done anything in a long time that I didn't know if I was going to be able to accomplish. And this was one of those scenarios where I was going into the race with the goal of being able to complete 100 total kilometers. And that was how I trained, and kind of, talking about this idea of manifesting things and trying to put them out there is what I would like write down and what I would speak into existence. But it's probably the first time where I was going to an event where I honestly didn't know if I was going to be able to accomplish that goal. I think prior to the ultra marathon, I did my first marathon and I did a duathlon, and like heading into those, I was pretty confident that I was going to be able to accomplish the goal that I set out. But with this, I didn't know, like the chances of failure was much higher than success. And I think it's good to put yourself into those situations, a couple times in a year, I think, in order to learn a little about yourself.
Yeah, I think there are so many parallels to life. I mean, again, I'm biased, right? I have a company called Project Endure where we talk about endurance. But, I agree 100%. Those hard things, those physical challenges and feats that we might go after where we're unsure if we're going to be able to finish them, or we know they're going to hurt, or we know there's going to be a sticking point where we're going to have to overcome ourselves. I think that is so transferable to life, it's not even funny. It's just amazing because we all have these negotiations with ourselves every single day, whether it's, should I get up when my alarm goes off or hit snooze? Should I go to the gym or not go to the gym, or whatever it is? We have these internal negotiations. And a lot of times when those negotiations stay internal, there's no external measurement of success or failure. There's no external accountability. Nobody knows whether or not we did those things because we're keeping that negotiation internal. And I think one of the beautiful things about what you did, and what so many people who pursue endurance events are, is that that negotiation is internal, but it manifests externally. And so there is a measuring stick. And that measuring stick, I think a lot of times helps people flip the switch and get on the positive side of that negotiation more often than not, and push closer and closer to where they want to go. And so I think for you, right, you said you were going to set out to do 100 kilometers and you ended up with 80. And I think that's very appropriate because a lot of times in life we shoot for one thing and we end up just a little bit short. What were some of the emotions and thoughts that went through your mind at the end of that race when you fell a little bit short of your original goal?
Yeah, I think in terms of emotions, like I knew the 100 kilometers would be like really pushing it, and almost like setting, a goal that was out of reach for myself was something that I thought would push me. So I think I wasn't like extremely emotional about not accomplishing the goal. I think, reflecting back, I'm always like, I wish I would have hit it, or could I have gone out for like another loop and pushed myself a little further. And you could always him and haw over that. But I just I think the most important, takeaway from the whole thing is that, I'm capable of much more than I think, because after I finished that, I was like, oh, okay, I know next time I come into this race, like I'm going to hit 100 kilometers for sure, because I know where I need to improve, and, improve in my preparation in terms of, building up my volume a little bit more, in preparation of my nutrition. I think that was a big aspect of the race that I definitely didn't have dialed in, that I think could have propelled me to hit my goal. So it was more being kind of fired up and pumped to do this again at some point and try to build off the things that I learned.
Yeah, and it's exactly a learning experience. And I have a quote pulled up here. As you know, I love quotes. And I think let's stay on this topic of endurance for a little while, because I think it's worthwhile to discuss in depth, because there are a lot of people out there who, one, know about the world of endurance sports through me, through other people that they follow on social media, or two, are in the world of endurance sports. And so the quote is, and I'm going to butcher this name, it's French, is maybe you can help me, Dalton, is Laurate Andre Guide. I think I said that somewhat
Sounds
close.
good, man.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
yeah. So he said, man cannot discover new oceans unless he has the courage to lose sight of the shore. And I think for me, big, audacious goals are a way of losing sight of the shore, because you have to go so far away from your comfort zone that you lose sight of it. And to me, that's where growth happens. And to me, that's the beauty that lies within the world of endurance sport. And so I'm going to ask you a question, Dalton. And the question is simple. What does the word endurance mean to you?
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting because I'm new into the endurance world, and I've learned a lot from it, about myself. But I think endurance to me is just like consistently showing up, day in and day out over a long period of time, knowing that you're probably going to meet some resistance. You're going to probably meet some times where you don't want to show up, you don't want to continue, you're going to be in pain, but being able to overcome those things and then learn that you're able to do hard things, I think is in itself what endurance, like how I would view endurance. And I think running in particular for me has been like a great learning experience about all of those things, because the barrier to entry is so low. You don't need anything. You don't need to go anywhere. You can go out your door and just run. So the barrier to entry is low. It's just you, No one else, you can't rely on anyone else. It's totally falls on you. You choose whether or not you move forward, or you don't. And I think there's a lot to be learned about yourself through running, and even about life. Like, I think there's a lot of parallels between the two for sure.
Yeah. And one of the biggest parallels for me when I run is just that next step analogy. And when the legs hurt, when the lungs burn, when you just want to stop, all you have to do is put the next foot in front of the other and repeat that process. And I think it's very tangible in running because it's just one foot in front of the other. And in life, the analogy gets a little bit messier because it's not that you're necessarily putting one foot in front of the other, but you're just trying to constantly do the next right thing over and over and over again. And the right thing could be a little bit fuzzy sometimes. And one of the barriers that many of my clients face is the doubt or the question, am I putting my energy and effort into the right things? What if I do this and it doesn't work out? Or what if I go this direction and I was supposed to go the other direction? And so those are feelings that I've experienced. I think every human being has experienced those thoughts and emotions in some way, shape, or form. Now, for you, as you prepared either for the endurance event, the ultra, or maybe your business venture, or maybe it's something else entirely, I'm sure you've faced those doubts and those feelings and questions. What are some of the strategies or insights that you've taken away from dealing with those questions and then moving forward despite them?
Yeah, that's it's tough because I think there's always something else that you could do or another direction that you could go. And I think for myself, it's laying out like what are some of the options that I have, looking at them and then just choosing one of those options and just going with it,
Mm.
and seeing what comes of it. I think you can get caught up in like a paralysis by analysis type thing where you're constantly hemming and hawing. But one of the things is like that I've learned is like taking that action and then fulfilling through that action and seeing what comes from it. And then whether it's positive or whether it's negative, it's then reacting to what happens. And I think if it becomes something that's not good and it's not going in the right direction, you can always, pivot or change. And then if it is going the way that you want, you can just double down on it. But I think you won't know whether or not that was a good choice until you start to get some feedback from the choice that you make.
Yeah, I think there are two things there for me. One is action creates clarity. And you're absolutely right. When we sit and we think about things, it could be easy to be paralyzed by all of the options and opportunities out there. And that's something specifically for me that I dealt with when I initially left my job and started my business and full-time entrepreneurship. It was, okay, all this time is freed up now. All these possibilities are here. And I feel overwhelmed by the options. What do I do? And where do I put my energy was really challenging. And then the other thing too is like, you have to have some level of faith or belief that things are going to work out if you continue to put one foot in front of the other. And I think it's this thing where in running, right, there's often a destination, or at least there's an end point, and that makes the event itself or the task itself a little bit easier because all right, when I hit 3 miles, I'm done, or when I hit the finish line, I'm done and I can rest. But life is different because there is no finish line. I mean, there is a finish line, but none of us know when that's coming. And I think that kind of eternal finish line concept can be really challenging because people don't have that ultimate goal to shoot for. I mean, the ultimate goal for a lot of people is to live a long, happy, and healthy life. But within that long, happy, and healthy life, there are smaller steps and goals we're pursuing. And so I'm curious for you, and this is crossover to my other podcast, but I can't help myself. As we look forward to the rest of our lives, I mean, is there something that you as a person are pursuing?
Yeah, I think just trying to understand or explore like the best version of me and putting myself into situations that are going to constantly pull that out of myself. And I think,
Mm.
you talk about like this journey that really never ends. And I think before, the last couple of years, I always thought like, okay, I have this endpoint that once I reach, like, let's say, this successful business, and I have my own house, and I have, financial stability for myself and my girlfriend, and we're in good positions, like I'll have made it and I'll feel good. And I think those are all things that I continue to like strive for. But more importantly, I think, is just trying to pull the best out of myself and put myself into situations that are going to do that. And I think as an outcome of those things, I will get to those other goals that I have. So I think constantly trying to put myself into that situation and challenge myself in that way is kind of what I'm on the pursuit of. And who knows what that is going to result in my life,
Yeah, I mean, I have two thoughts. One is from a speech that I watched recently. I've seen it a few times now, but a valedictorian at a high school gave this speech, and the title of the speech is "The 16th Second." And he talks about how he worked his whole high school career, all 4 years, to be voted valedictorian. He sacrificed spending time with friends, all of the other things that most high school students are doing to have this accolade. And he got the news that he was going to be valedictorian. And keep in mind, he's saying this all in his valedictorian speech. And so he got the news he's going to be valedictorian, and he was on top of the world for 15 seconds. And then the 16th second came, and he said, now what? And he realized that he had achieved this outcome that he had sacrificed so much for. And now that outcome was come and gone, and it was over with. And now what was his question? And it was just such a powerful concept for me, because I think a lot of times we chase outcomes. We chase, I'm going to run 100 miles. I'm going to open up a business. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. But when we finish those things, the question will always be, now what? And I think always having something to move forward toward is a necessary component of handling hardship and dealing with adversity. And so, a driving force or a purpose or a reason why you're doing what you're doing, I think, is so vital for anybody who wants to endure life and not just get by, but actually thrive as we endure. So that was point number one. And then thought number two was kind of a plug for the Hard Things Club that I'm running through Project Endure. And it's a community of people who are intentionally doing hard things on a daily basis, in a community of people who are all supporting one another and doing hard things together. And the reason we're doing hard things like cold showers, daily push-ups, meditations, is because of exactly what you said, putting ourselves in those potentially uncomfortable or challenging environments and situations over and over and over again, and surrounding ourselves with people who are doing the same, because we trust and we understand that those periods of resistance and those times of challenge are going to make us stronger, more resilient, better versions of ourselves. And I think it takes a very specific type of person to want to pursue those things. And so just wanted to say, Dalton, kudos to you for pursuing that. I think that's a really admirable thing to do. And then my really final question for you as we begin to wrap up is, as you endure life, as you endure business, races, whatnot, what is the underlying driving force for why you do what you do, especially when times get hard? What do you go back to, and what is that reason why for you?
Yeah, it's something that I think like that. And I feel like we've talked about this before on another podcast. And I think it's, for me, I still don't know exactly what the deep underlying thing may be. I think there might be something deeper than just wanting to continue to pull, the best out of myself, right? Or be the best version of myself. There might be a deeper layer to that. That I'm not going to, or not identifying, and that could be something to explore a bit, because I think for right now, if you were to ask me that question, I would say, like, because I want to try to be the best version of myself, and that's what's my why, and that's what's driving me. And I feel like if I'm being the best version of myself, I'm then going to be able to impact the other people around me, such as my girlfriend, my friends, my business partners, to then have an impact on them. And hopefully my thought is that they'll want to be the best versions of themselves based off of seeing me pursue that. And I kind of hope that would be like the trickle down effect of that pursuit. But maybe there's another layer to it, man. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing about that question is that the answer will probably change and evolve over all of our lifetimes, and understanding that that's okay and that's normal. And I think for you right now, it's just interesting that you started at one level and then you connected being the best version of yourself to impacting the people around you, both close and far. And I think I have that parallel with you. And one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I understand that we don't always know what other people are going through, and everybody's always struggling with something. Sometimes it's a little bit heavier than others. But I want to be able to be that light for somebody else because other people have been that for me. And I understand that by doing hard things and walking the walk and, pursuing the best version of myself, that I am inevitably creating ripple effects, whether or not I can or cannot see them or will ever know the people that it has impacted. I'm doing that, and you're doing that. And I think the fact that life is bigger than just us is a staple in any strong and meaningful driving force. So on that note, on that deep note, I want to thank you again for taking the time to have this conversation, Dalton. Obviously with the business and all that, you're super busy, but you're still making time for things that are important to you. And that's something that's worth some applause. So, but, if you were to tell people where to connect with you, because I know that you're big on connection, where would that be? What's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, I think like to kind of reach out to me personally, you could just follow me on Instagram, dlaino.93. So you can send me a message there. And then looking at some of the other stuff that we do, if you're into health, which I'm assuming you are, or want to kind of learn how to better your health, you can follow our Instagram page, The Movement PTs. We put out a lot of free content there around that. And then, I seem to have a plethora of podcasts, but, you can check out my personal podcast, The Weekly D Show. I interviewed Joe. I've interviewed Sam, who I know you've talked to many times, Joe. So, have some good conversations there. So you guys could check that out on any podcast platform, and we'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's good. And just to plug The Weekly D Show one more time, I forget exactly what number episode I was, but whatever it was, that was my favorite podcast that I've been a guest on to date. And I just went through recently to try to categorize the podcasts I've been on, and it's been over 50. So out of 50 plus, Dalton, yours is number one. And if you're listening to this podcast, I would encourage you to go find Dalton's podcast, listen to that episode, listen to any episode, and I know you'll get value from it. But Dalton, once again, thank you so much for your time, man. This was awesome, and I can't wait till next time.
Joe, I appreciate it, man. It's always a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. Oh, and one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.